Welcome to Echoes of Africa, where hidden stories, bold voices, and untold truths rise from the heart of the continent. Before you dive in, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because every echo here reveals the Africa they don't want you to see.
Now, since 1994, there have been something like 100 race-based laws that have been implemented in South Africa. What's been the impact of these laws?
So South Africa is the most racist country in the world. You'd think, having got rid of apartheid in 1994, having peacefully handed power from a white minority government to a democracy in South Africa, you'd think the last thing that our country would want is to return to a racist situation. But the ANC government has instituted 114 race-based laws since 1994, and they're doubling down. They're increasing them under the guise of transformation. But what is black economic empowerment? Theft. What is expropriation without compensation? Theft. The ANC government has instituted racism in order to basically break and steal the economy. And a report came out recently by Professor William Gumede, who said that black economic empowerment, those wonderful three words that you'd think, oh, it sounds very nice, I could probably accept that, has transferred 100 trillion rand to 100 families in the last 24 years. The ANC has run our country for 24 years, have introduced 114 race-based laws since 1994, and there's economic genocide taking place, not just against white people, but against colored people and Indian people as well. It's horrific. We're really on the edge of economic collapse, on becoming a failed state, thanks to the ANC.
Now, Rob, you're in the country, you're in Australia. What would your message be to our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, about what's happening in South Africa and what he can do to exert some pressure? Because we saw during apartheid, great pressure exerted on South Africa to change its ways. Other than Donald Trump, no one else seems to be speaking about this.
Well, I don't have much faith in leftist governments like Canada and Australia to actually say or do anything. You know, all we ask of the world, of the decent part of the world, is just tell the truth. Just tell it like it is. And Donald Trump has basically stood up and said, I'm not happy with what's going on in South Africa. I'm pointing a spotlight on the country, and we're going to make sure that punishment fits the crime. And I'm not sure what that is and when it's going to come, but Donald Trump and his administration, I have to salute them. And I wish Albanese would even stand up and put a spotlight on South Africa, but I don't have much hope for that.
Well, let's hope he changes his mind. There are many South Africans in this country. We've got quite a big expat population, and let's hope they speak up. You have been very outspoken, very brave in talking about this issue, and we really do appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you for joining me tonight.
A shift has begun inside the global financial system, and South Africa is sitting at the center of one of the most important economic conversations of this decade. For decades, financial influence flowed in one direction, from major Western economies toward the rest of the world. Transactions, settlements, clearing systems, and digital payment technologies relied heavily on US-dominated infrastructure. But as global economies evolve and new alliances form, that long-standing structure is being challenged. South Africa, one of the continent's most dynamic financial engines, is now building a new payments ecosystem that reduces dependence on old financial pipelines and creates a more autonomous system for itself and its partners. This change didn't happen overnight. It began as a practical need: modernize payments, cut transaction costs, increase financial inclusion, and create faster, cheaper digital systems accessible to millions. But as the project expanded, it grew into something larger, a symbolic shift signaling that South Africa's financial future would not be built on reliance but on sovereignty, innovation, and regional empowerment. The world started paying attention when South Africa rolled out its rapid payments program and PayShap, a digital system that allows instant, low-cost transfers across banks and mobile platforms. It became one of the most significant upgrades in African finance in years. Suddenly, a new question emerged: was South Africa quietly reducing its dependence on Western-dominated financial rails? As global analysts examined the implications, they discovered a deeper story. South Africa wasn't just modernizing its system. It was positioning itself as a financial hub for an emerging multipolar world. With BRICS membership expanding and new discussions around alternative settlement currencies, South Africa's updated payment network could serve as a foundation for future international transactions outside existing Western frameworks. The idea wasn't to reject global finance, but to diversify the tools available, creating more balance in a system historically dominated by one direction of influence. In major economic centers like Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban, financial institutions began integrating new digital payment technologies. Banks collaborated rather than competed, building interoperable systems that connected previously fragmented financial platforms. South Africa's Reserve Bank emphasized resilience, local infrastructure, and reduced reliance on external intermediaries for domestic transactions. By doing so, they addressed one of the biggest vulnerabilities of emerging economies: exposure to geopolitical pressure, sanctions, and global financial shocks. The timing was significant. Around the world, countries sought greater financial autonomy, especially as global tensions, currency fluctuations, and economic sanctions became more common. Nations in Asia, Latin America, and Africa started rethinking their dependence on U.S.-dominated payment pathways like SWIFT for certain transactions. South Africa's moves aligned perfectly with this new trend. Instead of waiting for the global system to shift, the country began building its own future. The launch of PayShap became a turning point. It wasn't just a convenient digital tool. It was a demonstration that South Africa could create advanced financial technology on its own terms. The platform allowed instant transfers using simple identifiers like phone numbers, dramatically lowering barriers for millions of people. Small businesses, street vendors, and informal workers suddenly had access to fast electronic payments without high processing fees. It was a revolution designed not for global corporations but for everyday citizens. Yet the implications reached far beyond local commerce. Global analysts began comparing PayShap to other fast payment systems around the world, systems often backed by major economies. The fact that South Africa developed its own system, tailored to its own needs, hinted at a larger goal: reduce dependency on U.S.-linked financial pipelines that historically shaped how money moved globally. It was a quiet but powerful statement, one that echoed through global markets. South Africa's participation in BRICS strengthened this narrative. As discussions of alternative payment systems grew within the bloc, South Africa became one of the nations actively exploring more diversified settlement options. While no immediate replacement exists for the US dollar in global trade, the idea of multiple systems functioning side by side gained momentum. South Africa's digital payments upgrade positioned it well for whatever innovations come next. As the world watched, some observers in the West began expressing concern. The shift didn't threaten the U.S. financial system directly, but it signaled a trend that could reshape global influence over time. For years, the U.S. benefited from serving as the backbone of global financial infrastructure. If more countries built their own systems, the balance of power could gradually shift. South Africa's bold modernization represented one piece of a much larger puzzle forming across the global South. Inside South Africa, the reaction was different, more optimistic, more confident. The new payment system was seen as an example of African innovation, proof that the continent could design modern solutions without waiting for Western approval or technology. Local fintech startups flourished. Banks collaborated on open banking standards, digital wallets expanded, and cross-border payment talks with other African nations accelerated. This evolution fed into a broader continental trend: Africa's growing movement to build independent economic systems rather than rely on external frameworks that don't always serve local needs. The African Continental Free Trade Area (AfCFTA) created pressure for nations to standardize digital payments. South Africa's forward-thinking approach placed it in a strong leadership role within the agreement, giving it the chance to influence how billions in inter-African trade will flow in the future. Meanwhile, U.S. analysts debated whether America underestimated the strategic importance of payment technology in emerging markets. For decades, major Western institutions dominated African financial systems. But now African countries were building, scaling, and exporting their own solutions. This shift didn't erase Western influence, but it introduced competition, and competition changes everything. As South Africa's financial independence grew, new investment flowed into the country's fintech sector. Venture capital firms from Europe, China, and the Middle East pursued partnerships with South African digital payment companies. Local developers became global innovators, designing mobile money platforms admired worldwide. The country's advanced banking infrastructure made it a perfect testing ground for next-generation financial technology. What emerged was a powerful narrative. South Africa wasn't rejecting the West, it was elevating itself. The growth of the new payment system sparked discussions across the continent. Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Ghana, and Rwanda launched their own digital financial expansions, inspired partly by South Africa's progress. A continent-wide transformation began unfolding, with digital payments replacing cash, local systems replacing foreign reliance, and regional trade replacing old colonial era supply chains. In global forums, South Africa's payment innovations were highlighted as models for emerging economies seeking independence. Countries in Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East studied the system, seeing how it balanced modernization with sovereignty. As conversations continued, one message became clear: financial autonomy is becoming a key measure of national power. South Africa's journey is far from over, but the foundation has been laid. With a modern payment system, expanding digital adoption, rising fintech startups, and growing geopolitical influence, South Africa has positioned itself as one of the most important financial players in the developing world. The world's largest nations, including the United States, cannot ignore the shift. The global financial map is being redrawn. Influence is decentralizing, new hubs are emerging. And South Africa, through practical action rather than political confrontation, has secured its place in this new chapter of economic history. What happens next will shape not only South Africa's future, but the future of global finance itself. A world once built around a single axis of influence is becoming multipolar, more diverse, and more competitive. In that transformation, South Africa stands not as a follower, but as a builder.
You've been watching Echoes of Africa, where every story carries the sound of tomorrow. If this moved you, subscribe now, like, and share so Africa's voice never fades into silence.